Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Lefford, who is the author of the book Correcting Corrections. Lefford, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mike. How are you doing today, my friend?
Doing great, and really looking forward to our conversation about your book, because I know it's just such a near dear topic on your heart, or else you would not have taken up this cause and written this book. I've got some experience working with some ministries that work with correction facilities, so I know that recidivism is a huge thing, and I know that corrections may need correcting. So I'm curious, how did you come up with that kind of approach, correcting corrections? What's your background? What led you to this project?
Well, I was in the Air Force for nearly 31 years. I joined the Air Force at 17, and I got out when I was 48 years old. And I was running a mental health program in the city of Sumter, trying to help geriatric patients that were doing that transition. And I got a call from the director of the South Carolina Department of Corrections, and Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, actually had him contact me because of my background and the military member, a policeman, and working in mental health field to see if I can come help with the mental health problem. There were a lot of people dying in prison, and many of those people that were dying were mental health patients, people struggling with mental illness. And so they thought that based on my background and my knowledge as a chief master sergeant, that I'd be the perfect person to work on this project. And what I found after just a few months of working in that system is that they were absolutely wrong. I was not the right person for that job. Now, I was the right person to help, but there was no right person for the job because many of the people that were incarcerated with mental health issues should have never been in prison at all. And so based on what I learned in that time and what we went through, I decided that me telling the story would be helpful. And I gave a TED Talk about correcting corrections, but it needed to be in everybody's hands. Yeah. Because this issue affects the world. And when you say it affects the world, when you got 2.5 million people that are incarcerated in this country and across the world, there are other places like that. If we can correct corrections, we can do a lot. And so that's why I wrote this book. When I say write this book, this is why I asked for help to help me write this book. And there are people like you in the world that stepped up to help me get this message out.
Yeah, and it's really neat when you can get behind and work alongside of people that have a passion about something so big. And I don't want to move past that comment about the ripple effect of impacting the world, because you just don't know. And it's like the pebble in the ocean or pebble in the lake, where it's like the ripples and then it goes and goes and goes. And let's talk a little bit about some of the stats. How big is the statistical realm that we're talking about here? Because when you say the world, it literally is impacting the world, and there's so much that needs to be done.
Yeah, one of the things for me, the United States, the most advanced, powerful, the best country in the world, in my opinion, we have more people incarcerated in our country than any other country in the world by a big margin. Yeah. Right? And so when I say the number, we just got a lot of people that are incarcerated. The next closest person are like the Middle East and like Iran. So it is a big deal. And 1 in 5 people that are in our prison system have a mental health problem, or they suffer with some type of mental illness. And that is huge percentages, because what that does is that affects everybody in every community, men and women and children who are family members or people that are incarcerated or are struggling with mental illness. So the statistics are staggering that 25% of the children that one parent is suffering for a mental illness may end up incarcerated, and that person will struggle with basically post-traumatic stress because they got a parent that's in prison.
Yeah.
So I don't know I know you were in school, and I don't know if you remember the time, but it's tough in school. You can have a funny name in school, and people will talk about you and bully you. You can wear off-colored clothes, and people will pick at you. Imagine having a parent in prison, and then you have to go to school.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things that pop into my mind when you mention these two things. Number one is the 1 in 5 that are incarcerated have a serious mental illness, and when you think about the comment or the word that I mentioned earlier, which is recidivism, which is the chance that someone that gets out of prison will actually go back to prison. That's a pretty high percentage, I know, but how do you fix that? And I know there is no fix; it'll never ever go away. But how do you help move that number down a bit, because it's behavioral. It's all of the things that we know, and we don't need to get into that. But I wonder if a key or a sweet spot in really helping that is the mental illness aspect, because if you can work with the people while they're incarcerated with some mental illness support, maybe then that really helps that recidivism rate. Would you think there's a key to that?
See, I think that is a problem right there, because well-intended people have thought that same thing. Mm-hmm. And for instance, a judge will say, hey, this person is in need of mental health care. Let's put them in prison for a year versus 2 months. So in that year, they can get some care. They can get some treatment. And it's been said, okay, so you get somebody that goes into prison for a year. They really did a little misdemeanor. They should have only been in jail for a couple of months. They go to prison. In prison, which is understaffed, all of a sudden you got somebody that's got a mental illness that can't follow instructions correctly, and they're told by a prison official to do something that they can't do. Yeah. Then all of a sudden they get a charge, and then that 1 year ends up being 3 years, and they really should only been there for 2 months. Yeah. Because if you have a mental illness when you can't follow direction or you can't cope in civilian society, it's much more difficult to cope in the corrective side. Yep. And on the other side of it, there are a lot of people that aren't so good people that have been incarcerated. They've done some bad things. And sometimes a person with a mental illness that's in prison are abused by other inmates. They're asked to do things or demanded to do things that they don't have the mental capacity to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And they end up getting drug charges, and they end up getting abused. So it is a vicious cycle that if somebody has a mental health issue and the reason that they're in prison is because of their mental issue, not necessarily because of something that they did wrong, that is terrible, and that is trouble waiting to happen.
Yeah, and your example there really brings it to light where, what if the guards or the administrative staff that are trying to work with a prisoner is telling them something that they cannot do, like you said, that then comes off as resistance, which then has this whole other domino effect. But then on the other hand, like you mentioned, it's like, okay, well now they're susceptible to other influences, and now they might get thrown in with other charges, and now they're in longer for that reason too, and it becomes, like you said, that vicious cycle. And I think that is something where the well-intentioned judges of the world, or whoever that it may be, think that, oh, they'll get the support in prison, and then they don't, because either it's not there for them, or they quickly move to the level that you're describing, where it's like all of a sudden within a 30-day period, now they're in the realm of all these troubled inmates, because the guards don't see them as someone that needs help. So what are some flags or triggers that then a prison facility could be watching for to help them get that help that they need?
Well, there's an assessment in prisons now. There's an assessment when an individual enters prison, and we're checking to see what their mental capacity, mental status is. And then based on that, they get what's the word? They get monitored based on that. They're put into a certain classification based on their mental status. So that is what we do now. But one of the things that I say, for me, prevention is the cure. We need to identify and prevent people that have mental health issues from actually entering prison or jails in the first place. That is the bottom. If you want to look at the premise of my entire talk in this whole book, is that if we can do early identification, we can get people their medication, we can get them treatment, we can get them counseling, we can get them therapy before they interact with the police, then that is going to change the face of corrections in this country.
Well, that's a really, I feel like that's a powerful concept because, yes, there's a certain population that are already in prison that need the help, that have the things that we just mentioned where, okay, let's try to help them. But to really help to chunk down on that problem and solve it, let's have them not get there in the first place, which could be what are some misdemeanor type things that could be triggers where there's a, well, we could do this or we could do that, and let's not send them to prison because this evaluation, and let's work with, maybe some community services or some local government type programs where these people could be identified as potential recipients of this care. And then now we're not putting them into that, which then, to your point, the guards are overworked and understaffed and all of these things, which then lessens the burden on the correctional facilities.
Exactly. And some places are. And I talked about that in the talk, and it's in the book, that in South Carolina, when I started this process and I started talking about this, we have 46 counties in South Carolina. Of the 46 counties, 6 of those counties had mental health courts or drug courts. Mm-hmm. And a drug court, mental health court, is actually you're doing treatment and you're taking care of the people instead of putting them in prison. But there's almost like a carrot and a stick. The carrot side of it is that you get treatment, you get help, you get attention paid to you. The stick is if you don't do what you're supposed to do, we're going to end up put you in jail, and your charges are going to stick. But what that does is it gives a person an opportunity to get the help they need. And out of 46 counties, you only have 6 that's doing it. And what we've done is we've moved it so we're getting more counties actually having mental health and drug courts. That is prevention. That's getting in front of the problem. Mm-hmm. Now, some people are still going to not be able to comply, but think about it. Let's say 1 in 5. If we get 1 out of the 5 of those that they don't end up in prison, they don't end up in jail, we've won. Now, we want it to be 5 out of 5, but let's be honest. Sometimes that's not going to happen. Yep. So you get in front of the problem there. Now, and I'm not looking at a silver bullet. I personally think that we try to prevent people from coming in, and we treat the people that are actually in prison. You should have less numbers, but you treat those people. And on top of the treatment, you prepare them to help them transition into community, into society after they get out. Because this recidivism rate, if a person with a mental illness, when they get out of prison, if they don't get treatment, if they don't get care, a third of those people that get out are going to be right back in. Yeah. And the numbers, and this was back in 2015, 2016, almost 9,000 people per year in South Carolina left prison. Think about it, 9,000. So 3,000 of those people are going to be back in the next 3 years if they don't get help.
Yep.
Another statistic that is near and dear to my heart, of the 22,000 inmates that were in the South Carolina Department of Correction, 2,000 of those were veterans. 2,000 of those people served their country. What's important about that today? Today is September 11th, 2019, 18 years after September 11, 2001. So many of those people who served their country, went off and fought the nation's wars, came back with post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress, that many of those end up incarcerated for things that they've seen and done and seen based on their service, and they're in prison. And some of them, when they get out, even after a short stint, they get out, many will be back because they're not getting the appropriate care. So,
and then when they get out
so
again, it makes it easier for them to. So I would suspect that the recidivism rate is easy. It's easier to go back in the second and third time because it's like, oh, that's just me. Here's this broken record, kind of in the groove. And yeah, to your point about the veterans, it just is a powerful, huge need because they've given and served and done the things for our country, and now our country needs to come to their service and help them. And I think that's just such a powerful point that we need to make there. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's just so many things. There's so many ways that you hit it. So everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if we can prevent people from coming in, we can have that awareness. We can get people that need help. We can get them help. And because this mental health stigma, man, we could talk for days, and I know this isn't what this is for. This is about the book. But what we do is, hey, we can identify people that need help, and we get them treatment before they enter the correctional facility. When they're in the facility, we make sure we do what we can to make sure that they're good. And when they transition out, we got a place for them to go, medication that they can take. We have these things that we can do to support them across the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
I think that's how you correct. Not just a silver bullet, but there's many bullets that you need.
And guess what? It's not a switch that you flip. It's not overnight. It's not one program. It is a long-term mindset with a collaboration of a lot of different people, organizations, and support groups. And it just has to be this mission and cause.
Can I say amen to that?
Yeah.
Can I say amen to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think too many people think, this came across my desk, let me check the box, let's do this, and it's done, right? No, it needs, so I think that's a big thing I wanted to bring out. And here's something else. In the book, you talk about these statistics, and this one here jumped out to me, these 2 bullet points. More than 2.7 million children in the U.S. have an incarcerated parent, so that's 1 in 28 children, and approximately half of the children with incarcerated parents are under 10 years old. So that ties back to the point you were making. You know, oh, I'm going to make fun of you because your shoe's untied or you dropped your milk. You can get made fun of for little trivial things, but when you get made fun of for something like this, or you feel that pressure, that's family that can't go away. Oh, I can tie my shoe. Stop making fun of me. Well, you can't change this very easily. So talk about the impact to the children. And I think of it when I read those 2 statistics, I know that there's things that parents will do for their children that they will forego something on their benefit to make sure their kid has that. So how do the children get impacted, and how then could correcting corrections trickle down to benefit them?
Well, wow, there's a lot to that. Let me unpack it a little bit. One of the terrible things about this situation is when you got 2.7 million children in the U.S. with an incarcerated parent, many of those kids are going to be living in poverty based on a parent that's incarcerated. Poverty is one of those determining factors of when people are going to act poorly. So the fact that their parent is incarcerated may not directly contribute to them going to jail themselves, but because they're in poverty and a parent in prison, those things add to the fact that those kids, all of them, have a higher likelihood of being incarcerated themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that they're holding a secret. How embarrassed must you be where you got to hide something that you don't want anybody to know that your parent is incarcerated? So all of those things contribute to second and third and fourth generations of people that are in that cycle of incarceration, that cycle of poverty, that cycle of disenfranchisement and depression and anxiety and anger. It is a self-licking ice cream cone when you have this many people stuck in that cycle.
So I love word pictures, and you hear vicious cycle so many times, and you're like, yeah. But self-licking ice cream cone, that's the best. I think that's awesome. That makes the point 100%.
Well, think about it, Mike. I mean, this is the hard part for me. If all you see is negative,
yep,
and then you got somebody in your family that's incarcerated, you're poor, you're in what we call it the drug culture or the addiction culture. If that's all you see and that's what you believe you are, what's the probability that you'll follow in that same process?
Pretty darn close to 100%.
Something just happened to our community. Then I talked to you about it before the call. 2 young men were murdered in a shootout. 3 other people were wounded. Poverty, crime, drug war. These are the kind of people, you look at their background, many of these people are in situations where incarceration is there. It's a minority situation, minority people that were involved in this thing. And it's just heartbreaking that all this negative stuff is going on with these people. Imagine if we could have reached somebody. I mean, some people are saying, well, it's a gun thing. Some people saying it's a poverty thing. Some people say it's a mental health thing. What if we would have got in front of it and would have identified something in these people that could have diverted one of these people from that path? One person could have changed that outcome. Instead of 2 people dead, 3 people in the hospital, any person could have stepped in there. We could have stopped somebody with a mental health issue, stopped somebody with a gun, stopped somebody that had poverty. We could have affected somebody in a positive way. So there's so many things that just one person picks up this book, one person reads this TED Talk, one person gets treatment for mental illness, one person doesn't go to prison, one person that goes to prison comes out and gets into treatment. We can change the world one person at a time. And if we can't change the world, we can change the world for one person. So that's
I have a feeling that we could speak for about 9 more hours, but I literally felt like if I had a microphone, I would have dropped it right then. We can't change the world, but we can change the one person, but we can't change the world for them. And I think that's the thing is we can do what we can do. We know we can't solve it for everybody in one fell swoop, but somebody, the support groups, the families, the community, there's little tiny things that you can do that might make a world of difference. Let's wrap up with 2 things. Number 1, what is one thing that someone that's not part of the system and corrections and anything like that, but what's a community member could watch for in their community to make a positive impact to a family that has an incarcerated member? And then finally, after you mention that one thing that people can be watching out for, how can we purchase the book? Is it available on Amazon, and what's the best way that they can pick that up?
It's out there on Amazon. It's in Kindle and it's in paperback version, and it's really easy to go. It's Correcting Corrections: Why Am I in Prison on Amazon. But let's back up for the thing that I find is most important. What can you do? I am a big proponent of having a voice in your community. Let your elected officials know that mental illness is important. It is important that we talk about it, that we know about it, and that we do something about it. If there's somebody that is struggling with mental health issues or stress, talk to those people. We have returning citizens all the time, and then they're isolated, and people think that there's something wrong with them. Give them an opportunity. Give them an opportunity to do better. But if you or anybody else you know that are struggling with stress, with depression, with anxiety, with any of these things, go get some help. Go get help. You and I talked about this before. One of my really good friends, a colonel in the United States Air Force, basically drank himself to death because he tried to self-medicate instead of going to get some help. If a person has issues with their mental health, go get help. Yeah. That is the single biggest thing you can do for me. And I'm asking to go get some help. You're not alone. And if we can do these small things, in the end, we can do really big things.
Well, Lefford, such a powerful topic. Thank you for taking this cause on and making your TED Talk and putting this book out and taking the message out to the communities and to the support groups and the officials. And thank you for your service, and thank you for this book. And anyone interested in this, please go to Amazon and pick up Correcting Corrections, Why Am I in Prison by Lefford Fate. Lefford, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, brother, and keep up the good fight.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.